Life has a way of blindsiding people, unraveling years of trust and certainty in an instant. That moment for me came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, in the form of an envelope containing a simple DNA test result. I had taken the test out of curiosity, drawn in by an advertisement promising to reveal ancestral roots and genetic traits. It was supposed to be a fun experiment, nothing more than an exploration into my past. Instead, it became the catalyst that shattered my present. The results were mostly what I expected: European lineage, a predisposition to caffeine addiction, an affinity for endurance sports. But buried within the detailed report was something that stopped me cold. My son, Evan, whom I had raised and loved for 6 years, did not share my DNA. The weight of that revelation settled deep in my chest, pressing down with a force I had never experienced before. Disbelief clashed with the irrefutable evidence in front of me. The test didn't just suggest doubt. It confirmed a betrayal I had never even suspected. My wife, Lauren, the woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world, had been unfaithful. And worse, she had built an entire life around a lie. The house, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt like a carefully staged illusion. Every framed photograph, every shared memory, every whispered, "I love you," took on a sinister hue. Had she looked at me differently when she found out she was pregnant? Had she known all along? Or had she convinced herself that lies could overwrite reality? I replayed the past in my mind, searching for cracks in the foundation that I had been too blind to see. Lauren and I had been together for nearly a decade, our relationship built on what I thought was mutual trust and understanding. She had always been affectionate, reliable, and supportive. But now I questioned everything. Were her reassurances genuine, or were they attempts to pacify an unsuspecting fool? Had she looked me in the eye all these years, knowing Evan wasn't mine, and chosen silence over honesty? The timeline of our marriage became a puzzle I needed to solve. 6 years ago, when Evan was conceived, Lauren had been working late more often, attending more team-building events. I had assumed it was nothing more than a busy period at work. But was that when it happened? Was it a one-time mistake? Or had there been something ongoing? The questions circled relentlessly in my mind, demanding answers that only she could give. Instead of confronting her immediately, I decided to observe. If she had been capable of keeping such a monumental secret for 6 years, I needed to know who I was dealing with before I made my move. The anger boiling inside me needed direction, and I refused to give her the chance to manipulate the truth. I started noticing small things I had overlooked before. The way she kept her phone screen tilted away from me, the way she hesitated before answering casual questions about her day, the brief flickers of discomfort when Evan asked questions about family resemblance. It had all been there, buried beneath the surface, but I had been too trusting to see it. I needed more than speculation. I needed undeniable proof. I searched through old messages, emails, anything that might give me a glimpse into the truth. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. An archived email sent years ago, tucked away in a forgotten folder. It wasn't explicit, but the intimacy in the words was unmistakable. The name attached to it sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. It was someone I knew. The realization of who it was made the betrayal cut even deeper. It wasn't just Lauren's deception that had broken me. It was the fact that she had chosen someone within our circle, someone I had trusted. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages, each one confirming what I had already suspected. Evan wasn't mine, and the man who had helped create him had been in my life all along. The weight of the secret I now carried threatened to consume me, but I refused to let it break me. I wouldn't be reckless. Lauren had kept this secret for 6 years, but she had underestimated the man she had deceived. I wasn't going to be the clueless husband any longer. I had 2 choices: confront her immediately and let my rage dictate my actions, or play the long game and ensure that when the truth came out, she would have no way to escape it. I chose the latter. The betrayal had taken years to build. I would take my time tearing it down. The first step was to gather every piece of evidence I could. I needed more than a DNA test and an old email. I needed undeniable proof that would leave no room for manipulation or false narratives. If Lauren had kept this secret for 6 years, she would undoubtedly try to spin her way out of it. Couldn't allow that. I reached out to a private investigator, someone who could quietly dig into Lauren's past and present. While I had already uncovered the affair through digital traces, I needed more confirmations, movements, patterns. If she had been capable of deceiving me for this long, who was to say it had only happened once? The investigator wasted no time, agreeing to monitor her actions and provide me with the truth I had been denied for years. While I waited for the results, I began playing my part. I didn't let on that anything was wrong. If Lauren had spent years lying to me, then I would do the same to her. I continued being the same devoted husband I had always been, masking the storm that raged beneath my skin. Every "I love you," she said, every affectionate touch, became another layer of resentment I buried deep within me. At night, while she slept peacefully beside me, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing that the woman I had vowed to spend my life with had destroyed everything we had built. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, it was the fact that she had stolen my right to choose. She had made a decision for me, a decision that had shaped the last 6 years of my life without my knowledge. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and when it arrived, I would be ready. The days following my discovery felt surreal, as if I were trapped in someone else's nightmare. The walls of my home, once a place of comfort, now felt suffocating. Every interaction with Lauren became a test of my composure, a challenge to maintain the mask I now wore. She still kissed me in the morning, still texted me throughout the day as if everything was normal. But normal was dead, and she didn't even know it. While I played the devoted husband, my private investigator worked in the background, gathering the pieces I needed to reconstruct the truth Lauren had stolen from me. The reports started coming in, revealing patterns I had never noticed before, or perhaps refused to see. Lauren's movements were predictable, but there were discrepancies. Lunches that ran longer than usual, late-night messages she sent while sitting beside me on the couch, unexplained withdrawals from our joint account. Alone, these might have seemed harmless, but in the context of everything I knew, they painted a clear picture. I revisited her old emails, her social media interactions, everything that had once seemed insignificant. Pattern emerged. The name attached to the archived email, the man who had fathered Evan, began appearing more frequently than I had realized. His name was Daniel. He wasn't just some random one-night mistake. He had been part of our lives, a mutual acquaintance, someone who had shared drinks with me, smiled in my face, shaken my hand. That realization hit harder than anything else. With the investigator's help, I traced back 6 years, reconstructing what had led to this deception. Lauren and Daniel had worked together for years. The overlap between their late nights at the office and Evan's conception was no coincidence. The investigator retrieved hotel records, confirming that they had spent time together outside of work. More than once. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been deliberate. The sheer effort it took for Lauren to maintain the lie sickened me. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a fully orchestrated deception, one she had committed to long enough to build an entire life around it. I imagined her looking into my eyes, feigning love, while carrying another man's child, sleeping beside me each night while keeping a secret so vile that it threatened to tear apart everything I thought was real. Lauren had become a master manipulator, moving through life as if she had done nothing wrong. Her ability to compartmentalize was terrifying. The investigator dug further, revealing details I had never expected. It wasn't just Daniel. There were other indiscretions, smaller ones, spread throughout our marriage. Perhaps they had meant nothing to her, fleeting encounters that carried no weight in her mind. But to me, they were further proof that the woman I loved had never truly existed. I read through the texts between her and Daniel, each word chipping away at the remnants of my belief in her. She had spoken of me as though I were an obstacle, a responsibility she had to maintain rather than a partner she cherished. She had made jokes at my expense, trivialized our marriage in ways that made my blood boil. It was clear now. She had never planned to tell me the truth. She had always assumed I would remain oblivious, forever playing the role of the doting husband. Confronting her then would have been easy, but easy wasn't enough. I needed her to feel every ounce of the betrayal I now carried. I needed her to experience the unraveling of her life in the way she had orchestrated mine. A simple confrontation wouldn't suffice. I wanted a reckoning, I started preparing. I gathered financial documents, took note of our assets, made copies of everything that would ensure that when the time came, I held all the power. I consulted with a lawyer, who assured me that, with the evidence I had, I could walk away from our marriage without losing anything. More importantly, I could ensure that Evan, innocent as he was, would not be used as leverage against me. Lauren had stolen my right to choose, but I refused to let her dictate how this would end. The investigator uncovered one final piece of information that sealed Lauren's fate. Daniel was married. He had a wife and children of his own. The weight of that revelation struck me like a thunderbolt. Lauren had not only betrayed me, she had entangled another family in her web of lies. The depth of her deceit knew no bounds. Daniel's wife, unaware of everything, deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. I debated whether to reach out, to shatter her world the way mine had been shattered. In the end, I knew it wasn't just about revenge. She had been wronged just as I had, and she deserved to make her own choices based on the truth that had been denied to her. I drafted an anonymous email, attaching the evidence the investigator had collected. The hotel records, the messages, the confirmations of their meetings. I sent it, knowing that the storm it would unleash was inevitable. Lauren still kissed me goodnight, oblivious to the destruction brewing beneath the surface. She still laughed at my jokes, still went about her days as if she were a loving wife. I played my role well, never letting on that I knew the truth. But the mask was slipping. Soon, she would see the consequences of her actions unfold in ways she never anticipated. The final confrontation was coming, and when it arrived, I would be the one in control. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like walking through a storm, the pressure building with each passing hour. The weight of the secret I carried was suffocating, yet I refused to act rashly. Lauren still moved through our home with ease, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. I watched her closely, every interaction a study in deception. She kissed me goodbye in the mornings, sent casual texts throughout the day, and curled up beside me at night without a second thought. The difference now was that I knew, and soon she would too. The investigator had given me more than enough evidence, but I needed to ensure that Lauren had no possible escape. I worked with my lawyer to finalize everything. The house, our assets, and any potential leverage she might try to use. None of it would be left to chance. I gathered every financial document, every shared account statement, ensuring that when the time came I wouldn't just walk away. I would leave with everything. Daniel's wife had received the anonymous email a few days prior, and though she hadn't responded, I knew she had seen it. The investigator confirmed that she had confronted Daniel, and from what I gathered, their household was already in chaos. This was a storm that Lauren could no longer control. I just had to ensure that when it reached her, she had nowhere to run. I chose the moment carefully. It was a Friday evening, the end of a routine week, a night that should have felt like any other. I asked Lauren if she wanted to have dinner at home, just the two of us, something we rarely did anymore. She seemed pleased, completely unaware of what awaited her. As we sat at the table, I studied her face, searching for anything that would give away a hint of remorse, of guilt. But there was nothing. She smiled, laughed at small talk, completely convinced that the life she had built on lies would remain untouched. I placed the DNA test results in front of her first. The smile faltered, a shift in her expression, a flicker of confusion followed by something else. Realization. Before she could speak, I slid over the photos, the printed messages, the hotel records. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow. Her hands trembled as she reached for them, her breathing shallow. She didn't deny it. There was no anger, no outburst of defense. Just silence. The kind of silence that accompanies the collapse of a carefully built facade. I told her everything. That I knew about Daniel. That I knew about the years of deception. That I had already taken steps to ensure she had nothing left to manipulate. The house would be mine. The accounts had been separated. The documents for the divorce were prepared. There was nothing left for her to say that could undo what she had done. She tried to speak, to explain, to reach for anything that might justify the betrayal. But I wasn't interested in hearing excuses. She had stolen my choices, rewritten my life without my consent. The time for talking was long gone. Lauren's world unraveled in real time. The reality of her situation settled over her like a crushing weight. The realization that the life she had taken for granted was gone. I had expected anger, desperation, maybe even denial, but all I saw was shock. Perhaps she had convinced herself that this moment would never come, that the truth would remain buried forever. She begged for another chance, claimed she never meant for any of this to happen. But the words felt hollow, meaningless against the years of deceit. I had spent enough time trapped in her illusion. I wasn't about to be pulled back in. I handed her the finalized divorce papers, watching as the truth set in. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was the end. Lauren packed a bag that night. I had already arranged for her to stay elsewhere, made it clear that there was no salvaging what had been lost. She left the house without another word, the weight of her actions pressing down on her shoulders. Daniel's life had already begun to crumble as well. His wife had filed for divorce, his reputation at work tarnished beyond repair. He had reached out to Lauren, but there was no saving them. They had built their relationship on deceit, and now they had nothing left. The house, once filled with memories both good and bad, was now mine alone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I had lost. Freedom. Despite everything, Lauren attempted to contact me several times in the following days. Her messages were long, filled with regret and desperation, but I refused to read past the first few words. The damage had been done. There was no path forward for us. Mutual friends, now aware of the situation, quickly distanced themselves from Lauren. Some had suspected something over the years but never voiced their concerns. Others were outright disgusted, unwilling to associate with someone who had built her life on deceit. Even those who tried to remain neutral found it difficult to ignore the sheer magnitude of her betrayal. Daniel faced even worse consequences. His professional career took a significant hit. His infidelity had become a scandal within his industry, leading to lost clients and severed business relationships. His wife, now determined to make him pay for what he had done, ensured that he would leave their marriage with little more than his personal belongings. Lauren had gambled with everything, and she had lost. As for me, I finally embraced the new beginning that lay ahead. There was no more anger, no more resentment, just a life waiting to be reclaimed. The aftermath of Lauren's betrayal was nothing short of devastating. But not for me. I had already accepted the destruction, prepared for it, and embraced the change it forced upon me. For Lauren, however, the reality of what she had done continued to unfold in ways she had never anticipated. Lauren's world had collapsed the moment she walked out of our home. Without access to our joint accounts, she was financially unprepared for the sudden upheaval. Her attempts to reach out to friends for support fell flat. Many had distanced themselves, unwilling to be caught in the wreckage of her deceit. Some had sympathized with me, expressing their quiet disgust at how she had orchestrated an entire life around a lie. Others simply disappeared, unwilling to involve themselves in something so volatile. With nowhere else to turn, Lauren attempted to reach out to Daniel. But he had his own fires to put out. His wife had not only filed for divorce but had exposed his actions to his colleagues and associates. What little respect he had managed to maintain was stripped away. He had no home to offer Lauren, no support to give. In the end, they had both lost everything. For the first time in years, I felt untethered. The rage that had burned inside me for weeks, consuming every thought, had finally begun to fade. In its place was something I hadn't expected: peace. My home, once filled with lies and deception, was now truly mine. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was liberating. With Lauren gone, I turned my focus inward. My career, which had once taken a back seat to maintaining our marriage, became my primary focus. Without distractions, I poured myself into projects, rekindling the ambition I had let slip away. Colleagues noticed the change, and within months, opportunities one had never considered began to surface. It was as if, with Lauren's lies gone, doors that had once been closed to me were now wide open. I also took the time to reconnect with people I had lost touch with over the years. Friends I had unintentionally neglected because of my commitment to a false marriage welcomed me back without hesitation. It was a strange feeling, stepping back into a life I had abandoned without realizing it. I had spent so much time maintaining the illusion of stability that I had forgotten what true stability actually looked like. Despite everything, there was one unresolved part of my life I couldn't ignore: Evan, the innocent child caught in the chaos of his mother's mistakes. He was still young, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding him. To him, I was still his father, the man who had tucked him in at night, taught him how to ride a bike, held him when he was scared. Legally, I had no obligation to him. The DNA test had proven he wasn't mine, and I could have walked away without looking back. But morality wasn't as simple as legality. Evan had been raised with love, and none of what had happened was his fault. He was a victim just as much as I was. Lauren had assumed I would abandon him entirely, leaving her to pick up the pieces. But she had underestimated me. My love for Evan was real, and I refused to let her mistakes dictate my relationship with him. I sought legal counsel, ensuring that I still had visitation rights. Regardless of Lauren's actions, Evan was still a part of my life, and I wouldn't let him suffer because of his mother's deception. As time passed, Lauren's situation worsened. She had exhausted her options, reaching out to me one last time in a final attempt to salvage something. Her messages shifted from desperate apologies to bitter accusations, as if she believed I was somehow responsible for the mess she had created. She claimed she never wanted things to turn out this way, that she had only lied to protect me. It was a pathetic attempt at rewriting history, at making herself the victim. But there was no undoing what had been done. The truth had been revealed, and the world had moved on without her. Eventually, her messages stopped. Whether she had accepted her fate or simply given up, I didn't know. Nor did I care. The past had defined me for too long. The anger, the betrayal, the pain. It had all taken up too much space in my life. It was time to move forward. I renovated the house, removing every trace of the life I had once shared with Lauren. I replaced old furniture, repainted the walls, and removed anything that reminded me of the deception that had once lived here. The process wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A reclamation of what had been stolen from me. One evening, as I sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, I realized something profound. I had survived. The pain, the anger, the devastation. It hadn't broken me. If anything, it had shaped me into something stronger. I had lost everything I thought I needed, only to discover that I had never truly needed it at all. Lauren had built her life on lies. I was finally free to build mine on truth. Months passed, and the wreckage of my old life slowly faded into the background. The anger had dulled, the betrayal no longer a fresh wound but a scar, permanent, but no longer painful to the touch. I had built a new life from the ruins, one that was mine and mine alone. The pieces of my past no longer held power over me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was looking ahead instead of behind. Evan remained the only lingering connection to my past. Despite everything, I had stayed in his life. He didn't understand the full extent of what had happened, and I wanted to protect him from the bitterness that had nearly consumed me. I picked him up on weekends, took him to the park, read him bedtime stories like I always had. He was still my son in every way that mattered, even if the biology said otherwise. The legal battle had been surprisingly simple. Lauren had no argument against my right to see him, and the court agreed that consistency was what was best for Evan. Lauren, on the other hand, had disappeared from my world completely. Her calls had stopped, and word of her had faded. Occasionally, I would hear snippets from mutual acquaintances. She had moved to a smaller apartment, struggled to rebuild, and ultimately remained alone. There was no triumph in her downfall, only indifference. Her choices had led her here, just as mine had freed me from her grasp. Any lingering thoughts of revenge or bitterness had long since faded. She was simply a person I used to know, one who had made choices she could never take back. The irony was not lost on me. She had spent years lying, building a life based on deception, and in the end, she was the only one left with nothing. One evening, as I sat in a quiet cafe, I noticed someone familiar sitting a few tables away. It was Daniel's ex-wife, Claire. We had never spoken beyond what was necessary when the truth had first come out. But now, months removed from the chaos, there was a shared understanding between us. We had been casualties of the same war, victims of the same deception, and yet we had both survived. She saw me too, and after a moment's hesitation, she walked over. What started as small talk soon turned into something more. An honest conversation about survival, betrayal, and rebuilding. We weren't looking for closure. We had both already found that on our own. But there was something comforting in talking to someone who had walked through the same fire and come out the other side. Over the next few weeks, our paths continued to cross, first by coincidence, then by choice. We met for coffee, exchanged stories about our pasts, laughed about the absurdity of it all. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people who understood each other in ways few others could. For the first time in a long time, I felt something unfamiliar, hope. My home had undergone a transformation, both physically and emotionally. I had removed every trace of the life I had shared with Lauren. The furniture had been replaced, the walls repainted, the memories erased. This house, once filled with deception, was now my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe without the weight of lies pressing down on me. Work had become a new source of purpose. Without the distractions and emotional turmoil that had once consumed me, I had thrown myself into my career. Promotions, new opportunities, and a sense of fulfillment followed. I had spent years neglecting my own ambitions, but now, I was finally making up for lost time. Even my social life had revived. Old friends who had drifted away welcomed me back with open arms. I reconnected with people I had once lost touch with, realizing just how much I had sacrificed for a relationship built on falsehoods. I had let myself be consumed by something that had never truly existed, and now, I was reclaiming every part of my identity. Just when I thought she was gone for good, Lauren reached out one final time. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a handwritten letter, a desperate, last-ditch effort to explain herself, to justify what she had done. She wrote about regret, about how she never meant for things to end the way they did. She claimed she had been scared, trapped in a lie she didn't know how to escape. She wanted to meet, to talk, to find some way to make amends. I didn't need to read past the first few sentences. The letter found its way into the trash before I could even consider responding. There was no point. Lauren had spent years making choices that led her to this moment, and nothing she could say would change that. I had no anger left, no desire for revenge. There was only the simple, undeniable truth. She was my past, and I had no interest in bringing her into my future. The past had once consumed me, but it no longer dictated my future. I had lost so much, but I had gained something invaluable: freedom, clarity, and the strength to move forward. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it had all shaped me, but it did not define me. One evening, as I sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, I realized something profound. I had survived. The pain, the anger, the devastation, it hadn't broken me. If anything, it had shaped me into something stronger. I had lost everything I thought I needed, only to discover that I had never truly needed it at all. Lauren had built her life on lies. I was finally free to build mine on truth. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was no longer afraid, because now I was the one writing the story.